Radio Iowa is celebrating 25 years of providing you the best coverage of Iowa's top stories. In 1987, our first year on the air, Radio Iowa delivered a statewide broadcast of the Democratic presidential candidate debate from the Iowa State Fair. Through our affiliated stations, Radio Iowa was able to give access to this event to thousands of listeners across the state. It was an important day in Radio Iowa's history, and it's a level of service to our communities that we continue to provide each and every day. Your state, your news, Radio Iowa.
For 25 years, Radio Iowa has delivered the latest state news and sports to stations just like the one you're listening to now. When we started in 1987, Radio Iowa could be heard on 30 stations. Today, Radio Iowa delivers the state's top stories to over 60 stations and the communities they serve. You can hear Radio Iowa in nearly every corner of the state. Radio Iowa has grown a lot over the past 25 years, and we can't wait to see what happens next. Your state, your news, Radio Iowa.
It should be mostly sunny on this Tuesday with a high near 31 degrees. Tonight we'll see mostly clear skies and a low of 18. Tomorrow, skies should be mostly sunny with a high near 42. And tomorrow night it'll be partly cloudy with a low of 24. That's weather on KMEM, America's Best Country.
This is the award-winning broadcast of Healthy University, bringing health and vitality to you and your family, brought to you by Scotland County Hospital in Memphis. Now, here's your host, Dr. Randy Tobler.
Doctor, my eyes have seen the years and the slow parade of fears without crying. Now I want.
Hey gang, how you doing? Welcome to Healthy You. I'm Dr. Randy Tobler.
I have done all that
And there's Bud. And Elisa just stepped out to get me a little water.
Hey, doctor, how are you?
I'm recovering.
That's good.
No, not from Templeton Rye.
Oh!
The way you looked at me, Bud. Jeez.
Well,
can you believe this guy?
It's just,
I'm recovering. I never get sick. Last
I know
Tuesday
you don't.
after the show, started feeling a little queasy, Next thing you know, I think it was the norovirus, that cruise ship virus.
Slam bang.
And I didn't even get the cruise. No Alaska, no mountains, no Caribbean.
No mountains, nothing.
Man, that
but
knocked
the
me for a
illness.
loop for like 2 or 3 days. It's terrible. That's one of the three
So what
big
did you
things
do?
going
Did you
around.
Go home and cover up under the blankets and sweat it out, or what?
I thought it was just a little food poisoning, because this time of year, sometimes I'm a leftover guy, and we always have such nice Christmassy, and not Christmas, but New Year's foods and stuff. We keep them frozen, but a couple
Well,
may.
sure.
And I thought maybe I'd snacked on something that was a little imprudent. I didn't know. And
So
but
that's the way
anyway,
things
without
started
going into the
out.
details, it wasn't a thing. Let's just do a little word association. Does the word Linda Blair and exorcist mean anything to you?
Oh, my goodness. Projectile vomiting.
Oh, it was terrible. And at any rate, but beyond that, I mean, normally when you get the little 24-hour bug, it's like, okay, whatever, you drink some 7-Up, you're back on the saddle
Sure,
again the
yeah,
next day.
yeah.
Didn't happen. I mean, this is a wicked
No.
virus, and it is one of the big three
It's one of the big
that is
three,
floating
right?
out there. Well, they're not all viruses. One is a virus called norovirus. The other is a virus called influenza. Actually, a couple, 3 strains.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the bacteria, pertussis, right?
Right. So
Bordetella pertussis is the fancy name, but that's basically whooping cough.
So the norovirus,
Mm-hmm.
is that an every year occurrence?
If you're on a cruise ship, I don't know. No, it just comes and goes. It's not common it's a common viral illness that causes gastroenteritis, and the stomach flu kind of thing.
Right.
But at any rate, so we're going to talk with an expert about that later on in the program, an infectious disease expert
Yeah.
about all three
And
of these.
I
What's
got
the
some
status and what do they
questions
mean?
for 'em.
Yeah,
That's interesting.
Have you
And
stayed germ free?
You know what? I haven't had anything, and
Mm-hmm.
I've really been very, very careful
Mm-hmm.
to keep my hands washed and watch out what services I'm coming in contact
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
with.
yeah.
Especially if I know that, like, somebody in the family or something has something.
Right.
I've got this little fan, and I go around blowing fan
Right,
in their face
right.
so that the germs won't come
Yeah,
out.
and I can tell you with this little stomach thing, even normally, like I said, you feel good, and I felt pretty good by the next day. So I went in and tried to go to work. Within 2 hours, I had a fever and was feeling funky, and I knew it was something more
Yeah.
than that. And it turned out to, I stayed home a couple days. But so if you feel different, if you have an awareness that something's different, and you just don't feel on your game, be on guard. and start taking your temperature and listen to the symptoms, because it's wise to stay home and, make sure that you can just get a lot of sleep, let your immune system do its thing, and then you'll get back to work soon.
And
You got your flu vaccine, didn't you?
well, yeah,
Of course you
I
did.
got
You're a good soldier.
I got the vaccine, although I am not one of these people that believe that you can catch the flu from taking the vaccine. And I see another article today in Health News about that.
And I've had a number of pregnant women telling me they don't want their vaccine, and I'm so dismayed, because I've seen these women they're a susceptible population, along with youngsters and oldsters and people with chronic disease and so forth. Boy, I've seen these people end up on ventilators.
I know it. I don't know.
And it's just it's unfortunate, because I've they tell me they've been sick, they got the flu from the flu. That means they either were exposed to the true influenza before they got the vaccine, because it takes a couple weeks to be effective.
Right.
So if you get exposed anytime during that time, you're going to blame it on the vaccine, but it's
Right.
actually Aunt Minnie who kissed you at the church supper, right?
Exactly, or
And-
you had a really good take on the vaccine. That's
Right,
the other
or if
thing.
you had a really good take, but you'll get a flu-like type thing, but it's not the influenza.
No, it's not.
Well, to help us sort some of this out and to give us a little bit of some local flavor to what's going on in our area with the outbreaks of various creeping cruds of various stripes, in studio, Brenda Wilson. Brenda, I'd like to introduce you to Bud Wilson, my co-host here on
Hello
Healthy
there.
You.
I don't think I've ever met this gentleman
No,
before.
no.
I don't
Well,
know
at least
him.
you don't claim it if you have. Right?
Some people might say he's my better half. I guess.
And Brenda, of course, is the administrator of the Schuyler County Health Department and Home Health Agency. And on the line, Gail McCurdy, our epidemiologist here, 11 counties in Northeast Missouri, registered nurse. How you doing, Gail? Welcome to the program.
Well, good morning. Doing well. Staying well. Glad to hear you're recovering.
Yeah, boy, and you know what? You know it's not just a normal little 24-hour bug when you continue to have viral symptoms, and it's probably good that we talk about that. Just in terms of general viral symptoms, the skin starts to crawl. You have that sort of creepy crawler feeling on the skin. You get a little low-grade fever. You might get a high-grade fever, depending on the germ. And boy, it knocks you for a loop. You're just fatigued. You're down and out. You want to curl up in the fetal position and say, "World, goodbye." for a few days, just world goodbye, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. That sounds so sad. It makes you just want to rock someone in a rocking chair.
Yeah. But no one wanted to rock me when I was sick, let me tell you. I wish I had the Lysol concession. My wife spent a ton on the Lysol department, but that's important, isn't it? If someone in the house gets sick, let's ask that question. How important is it, Brenda, for someone to be very, very OCD and very, very disciplined about, whole house disinfection once someone's been sick?
Well, it's pretty important. As we know, it really isn't spread by inhalation, but it is by droplet. And so, it's a good thing to use the Lysol at least in the air.
Yeah.
Because that makes it heavy enough to bring it down, and
Right.
then the Lysol itself. And I'm not just plugging that, but the disinfectant, whether you use
Or a generic
bleach
imitator. Yeah,
or
right,
whatever.
right.
But
And are they all sort of equal? I mean, the name branded, the generic imitators, or bleach?
pretty much, and I think the important thing to look at is, just like we talk about in dieting, read the label, and
Right.
see what percentage
Okay.
of efficacy it has towards helping to prevent
Yeah.
or kill virus.
And I mean, my wife took the bed linens, cleaned everything and everything, because you never know.
Absolutely.
I mean, I just slobber a little bit. And then
Yeah,
it's like,
absolutely.
You get a little older. It does,
There was a reason that you changed the sheets once a week, no matter what.
Oh, you're drooling again, Randy. Jeez. Gail, how are we looking here in Northeast Missouri? I mean, are we still peaking? Have we peaked? Where are we?
Well, I wish I could say we really knew when that was going to be the peak, but that's not an answer that I have a crystal ball for. So at this point, let's put it this way. We kind of came on a little stronger probably toward the latter part of December, and it eked up kind of from central Missouri again. But sometimes this is kind of a distortion of a view, because we have to consider that what we're getting is reports from healthcare providers, and it's their cooperation how we get that information. So sometimes we have more providers in the central part of Missouri that might be reporting, so we saw that kind of eke up toward northern Missouri. Although, I will say, we do know in one of the counties, at least around the Macon County area, they certainly saw a huge impact probably right around before Christmas. They were just starting to feel the effects pretty significantly in the school system. So we know it hospital systems now.
Well, now, I read in the New York Times last week that, and reporting generally had been that nationwide we were dealing with sort of the three big problems.
Mm-hmm.
One, influenza, obviously. We've been talking about that since August, September.
Right.
Get your vaccine. You guys have been so good about getting vaccines, as have the local area health departments in the various counties. And there's been various levels of compliance, but I think in general we're doing better and better, and the match has been pretty good. So influenza is one. Number two is the pertussis, and I know we'd talked about that previously, but I'm wondering about the state of pertussis. And then this norovirus, which is apparently, that's the cruise ship virus that you hear about from time to time. And that seems to be a large epidemic around the country. Have you seen pertussis and norovirus in big quantities here in Northeast Missouri?
Well, interestingly enough, pertussis is reportable, so we hear about that quite a bit, and it's been really kind of a sore subject and ongoing intermittently, at least I'm going to call it in Missouri, not just Northeast Missouri. At least since 2006 that I can recall that having these sporadic outbreaks here and there, and it always seems to start among an unimmunized population, and then we end up, it starts kind of getting into the other population where our immunizations have waned some. So we still see pertussis, yes. And unfortunately, norovirus, whether I like it or not, it shows some seasonal effect, but quite honestly, it's one of those nice viruses that just kind of comes up whenever it feels like it.
Yeah,
when you've got a susceptible population that doesn't have a long-term immunity, here we go.
Yeah, it comes up whenever it feels like it. Was that a pun intended there?
Yes.
Thank you.
No,
I'm having bad flashbacks. It's a PTSD moment here. But I heard that the strain that's out there nationally is a wicked one, and in a few minutes maybe we'll talk with our infectious disease expert about some of the specifics there. Great. Hey, well, listen, we're going to ask one more question of Brenda, and that is, what have you been seeing just locally on the ground at the health department?
We've seen some, but I think more than anything else, we've seen people that are beginning, since the kids have gone back to school after the break, we're seeing an increase there in reportables, but we're seeing people that are coming in and requesting immunization that didn't get it before.
Mm-hmm.
And
do you think part of that's because of the stories that are in the media about hospitals putting up tents outside the
Absolutely.
hospital and things
Absolutely.
like that? People are saying, wow, I didn't get mine.
Absolutely. I think that's part of that there. But the other thing that I wanted to just touch on real quickly is that it is important, and they are still advocating that even if you've had the influenza, that you should go ahead, if you so desire, and see if you can be immunized, because there is not a guarantee that you could not recontract this.
Yeah, or you may have been affected with one of the viral types.
And not the others.
And I guess is there some cross protection? I think but it's not universal.
Right.
And we'll talk with Dr. Mannion, our infectious disease expert, about some of the vagaries and specifics about that after we take a break here. Gail McCurdy and Brenda Wilson, thank you very, very much. Thanks for looking out for our health. We do appreciate you very, very much. Thanks for coming in, Brenda. And Brenda, if you'd like to hang in here and stay here and keep an eye on Bud, we can always use a lot of help.
Okay.
It's a several person job, to do that.
I left the cuffs and the whips at home.
Oh, okay.
That's another show.
It's a family show, but we'll be right back on Healthy You. If it's Tuesday morning on KMEM, you got it. It's right here. We're Healthy You.
What's the link to higher yields? The Liberty Link system from Bayer. Whether or not you're facing resistant weeds, when you combine high-yielding Liberty Link varieties with the outstanding weed control of Liberty herbicide, you win. 70% of surveyed growers said Liberty Link soybeans yielded as good as or better than their farm averages. See their stories at thelibertylinkstory.com. Not registered in all states. Always read and follow label instructions.
I'm Dan. I'm Clay from Missouri Farm Bureau Insurance. They are the #1 insurer of farms in the state of Missouri. That's why I'm wearing this big foam finger. It's from the Springfield Cardinals baseball team. They're a farm club. Whether you're a farm or a farm club, Missouri Farm Bureau Insurance is number one. This foam finger makes my hand sweat. Here, Dan, you take it.
You don't have to be a farmer to save money with Farm Bureau Insurance.
For the past 25 years, Radio Iowa has served the Hawkeye State by delivering you Iowa's most important news and sports stories. Politics, natural disasters, historic moments, we've covered it all. Ever since our first broadcast in 1987, Radio Iowa has helped keep communities just like yours in touch with the news and events of Iowa. We're proud to have served you these past 25 years, and we're looking forward to the next quarter century. Your state, your news, Radio Iowa. When you like Radio Iowa News on Facebook, you won't get gossip or personal updates. What you will get is news, real news, politics, legislation, the economy, sports, and more. We'll help you stay up to date on the latest in the Hawkeye State. Whether it's a breaking story at the Capitol, an update from a press conference, or the latest headlines from the Cyclones or the Hawkeyes, our reporters are posting updates throughout the day. Log on to Facebook and like Radio Iowa News, and let us bring real news to your Facebook page. Your state, your news, Radio Iowa.
Hey there.
Hey there.
My son's gonna help me.
coming to help me.
Yep, it's the copy game.
Copy game.
I could say anything right now, and he'd repeat it.
He'd repeat
like,
it.
I just love Brussels
Like,
sprouts.
I just love, hey.
I'm careful what I say around him. I also try to make sure I pass on good energy-saving habits. You should too. Save energy and money at TogetherWeSave.com.
TogetherWeSave.com.
You know, my dad is the coolest.
My dad thinks he's funny.
This message from Missouri's electric cooperatives.
You sports fans out there will take every tiny crumble of sports information possible. It's an addiction. But at Missouri Net, we're not here to judge. We're here to feed that addiction. So in between our radio newscasts, Facebook posts, interviews, and stories on our website, we tweet. Follow at Missouri Sports on Twitter, and the sports information just keeps on coming. We're covering the games and providing scores, news from the sidelines, and more. That's at Missouri Sports on Twitter for you fans that just can't get enough. Your state, your news, Missouri Net.
Wait till your times are right for these arms to surround. You think you've flown before, but you ain't left the ground. Wait till you're locked in my embrace. Wait till I draw you near. Wait till you see that sunshine place. Ain't nothing like it here. The best is yet to come, and babe, won't it be fun?
And we're back. Thanks for that great bumper music, Bud Wilson.
Anytime.
I don't know if anyone else enjoys it, but I sure do, so gets me pumped up. All right, little Michael Bublé here, and been looking forward to talking with our next guest because he comes highly referred. He's highly awarded. He's a member in a society that I'm pleased to be a member of, the Alpha Omega National Honor Society, as well as having written books, Mosby's Curbside Clinician in Infectious Diseases, over 80 scientific articles and book chapters, published in the New England Journal of Medicine, on and on and on, Journal of the AMA.
Wow.
And Dr. Farron Mannion is his name, and he is an infectious disease specialist, and he's chief of that disease division, the infectious disease division and hospital epidemiologist at St. John's Mercy Medical Center in St. Louis.
St. Louis.
How you doing, Dr. Mannion? Great to talk with you.
Fine, thank you. Thanks for having me.
And we came to know of you through a former patient of yours and a good friend of ours up here, Jim Hughes, who is, he said you saved his life 15 years ago. So
he's too gracious.
Once in a while, no matter what the bureaucrats say about us, we actually can help people. That's good. That's good to hear that. So, boy, I imagine that your phone's been ringing off the hook, and you've been asked from all corners, not only from colleagues, how do I deal with this problem? What's going on here? I can't figure this one out. But I'm sure the news media and at cocktail parties over the holidays, been a pretty wicked influenza season, hasn't it?
Yes, it has. It really has. We expected that influenza would be with us sooner or later, but I think it was a little bit earlier than usual, and I think it's definitely in certain places in the country they're really seeing a lot more than they usually see.
I had heard, and I've had a hard time getting my finger on the actual reality here, but I'd heard that the strain that seems to be rearing its ugly head in the St. Louis area and beyond, in Missouri in general, is more of the type B, whereas nationwide we're hearing about the H3N2A. What's the story? Are we sort of a peculiar strain here, and maybe setting ourselves up for a second wave of one of the nationally prominent strains?
The data that I'm also familiar with, which initially most of the strains would be coming from children, because children are the ones that initially get the influenza, and then the adults kind of get it later during the wave. But the most of the ones that we had seen, and certainly in the St. Louis area, were B, but generally they were all children. Now, for the adults, I think things may be different because again, the data is often kind of lags behind by a week or two. So I wouldn't be surprised if A has caught up or maybe even surpassed it by now.
And looking at the CDC map today, it's changed just from a few days ago where the entire country was pretty much in red, meaning, peak, watch out, warning, Will Robinson kind of prevalence. It looks like there's a swath right down the center of the country from top to bottom and Utah, but otherwise it looks like it's cooling down elsewhere while we're still really pretty much in the throes of it.
That's true. It's almost sometimes too geographic, and it's hard to explain why that's happening. But a lot of times, it's thought that the influenza kind of goes from like southeast toward the west, and I think like places like California have not had as much of a widespread infections as places like in northeast. But to be honest with you, things can cool off and then things can pick up again. So I would say that stay tuned because we are right in the midst of the season itself, and the season is far from being over.
So you mentioned that reality. Is that because we don't perfectly match vaccines? We can't, obviously. It's a prediction, a best guess based on experience in the East, in the Far East, and elsewhere. Is it because the vaccines aren't 100% effective? Is it because people don't get vaccinated like they should? All of the above? People become complacent with hand washing and going in places when they shouldn't be. What do you think is the main reason for why we see a second blip sometimes?
Well, there could be several reasons, like you mentioned. Certainly, the vaccine is far from being a perfect vaccine. I think often the numbers that are thrown out is like it's about quote unquote 60% effective in preventing influenza-like illness that requires you to go to the doctor. So I think it's very important to emphasize that we're not saying just catching the flu. We're just saying that it was bad enough for you to go see the doctor, and that can reduce your chance by 60%. The problem is that, like you said, the strains of the virus that people often have to grapple with may be different than the one that they got vaccinated for. At least maybe enough that maybe won't prevent them from getting the infection completely. On the other hand, we are also looking at the host. Who is actually get the vaccine? Who is actually making what we'll call antibodies against the vaccine effectively? Unfortunately, we have a lot of people in the population, especially older folks, people that have underlying, medical conditions, people that have, for example, been on chemotherapy or have taken medications that affect their immune system. Those people are not expected to really have an excellent response to the vaccine. It may be that the response will be even lower than the average. And when that happens, then it's really hard to predict, what's going to happen to the wave. I mean, it's possible that, for example, children that get vaccinated, they may have a very good response because they're young and they're healthy. On the other hand, there's a huge number of older population who may still be susceptible and hasn't really been exposed to the virus, very widespread yet, and so they may get there may be another wave then, that because a lot of these, susceptible people are getting the infection during a second wave. So it is really difficult to predict exactly because you have this kind of an interplay between the host, the susceptibility of the patient to the infection, and then you're also dealing with the vaccine not necessarily being a perfect match sometimes, although based on what I know is that it is thought to be probably one of the better matches we've had in recent years, which is great. But even with the perfect match, I mean, the vaccine's still not a 100% effective product.
Doctor, I was wondering, is it usual for us to see 2 or 3 different disease processes, infectious disease processes going on at the same time during the right months, or is this a little bit unusual? And because we've had such an intensity early on, are we setting ourselves up for maybe a perfect storm in February or March with some of these?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good question. The winter season, traditionally, we see a spike in a variety of different infections, and a lot of times they are actually concurrent. And so there's, for example, this virus that we call respiratory syncytial virus. It's called RSV, and often, targets children, infants especially. And that's a respiratory virus. Adults can get it too, and that traditionally comes around, in the winter time. There's another virus that you probably have seen, in news. It's kind of a winter vomiting virus, which is usually called a norovirus.
Personally,
yeah, we were talking about that. I think I had that last week. I thought I just ate a little, stale leftovers, and I got the fever, and my wife got out. We were like doing a sequel on The Exorcist at our home. It was terrible, and I didn't even get the cruise, Dr. Mannion.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It comes on. I've had my share of that too, not this year, but in the past. Yeah. But right in dead winter, all of a sudden you get this horrible retching, vomiting. Sometimes you get diarrhea. It usually is self-limited. In 2 or 3 days, it's gone. But it can go through the family like wildfire. Mm-hmm. And that also, again, is winter vomiting. So that obviously comes around the winter. And then you have all these other respiratory viruses. You got the cold viruses, and then unfortunately you also see complications as a result of having these viral infections, like, for example, influenza. So you get pneumonias more often. You get these bacterial pneumonias due to germs like staph and what we call pneumococcus. So they all kind of are connected, unfortunately. So seeing several different disease processes, infections during the winter months is not unusual at all.
That's Dr. Farron Mannion. I know you're a busy guy. Can you stay another segment with us? Because we do want to talk about some practical do's and don'ts and maybe bust some myths concerning influenza, the vaccine. And I'd like to talk also about whooping cough, because we're hearing a lot about that out there, and sort of some newer recommendations as far as vaccines. You got a little more time for us?
Sure, I'll be glad to.
That's great. Now, folks, this man is a true, legend in infectious disease. If you look at his resume, it reads like the Yellow Pages. So don't believe Tobler, okay? I'm just a country doctor. I know. Tobler said get your flu vaccine, whatever. Okay, look at him. He got sick. We've got a real expert, and I want you to take his advice to heart, because if not, this can be a deadly, deadly advice. We joke about it, but it's not funny if you get it. No. You'll end up in the hospital or worse, So when we come back, we'll talk about a little bit of that and maybe some other interesting topics, too, and take your phone calls here on Healthy You. The numbers, Bud?
Yes, 1-800-748-7875 and 660-465-7225.
Farron Mannion, Chief of Infectious Diseases Division and Hospital Epidemiologist at St. John's Mercy in St. Louis, joins us on Healthy You.
In a world filled with uncertainty, it's good to know your money is safe. No matter what type of account you have with us, checking, savings, money market, retirement, or certificate of deposit, your money is safe. We're your hometown bank. When you bank with us, each depositor is FDIC insured to $250,000. Community Bank in Memphis will be closed January 21st for Martin Luther King Jr. Day. We will be open regular business hours Tuesday, January 22nd. Hometown banking with your neighbors and friends at Community Bank of Memphis, Equal Housing Lender, member FDIC.
For 25 years, Radio Iowa has delivered the latest state news and sports to stations just like the one you're listening to now. When we started in 1987, Radio Iowa could be heard on 30 stations. Today, Radio Iowa delivers the state's top stories to over 60 stations and the communities they serve. You can hear Radio Iowa in nearly every corner of the state. Radio Iowa has grown a lot over the past 25 years, and we can't wait to see what happens next. Your state, your news. Radio Iowa.
Since 1987, Radio Iowa has provided you with the best state news and sports reports each morning and afternoon through affiliated stations, just like this one. That's a lot of reports. In fact, in the past 25 years, Radio Iowa has delivered over 120,000 daily news and sports programs. 120,000. And that's not even counting the ones we've done today. Radio Iowa. 120,000 reports and counting. Your state, your news. Radio Iowa.
In Missouri, the Wildlife Code states that no person shall take or attempt to take wildlife from or across a public roadway with a firearm, bow, or crossbow. The public roadway includes the right-of-way, which is owned and maintained by the state of Missouri, county, or municipal entity. Taking wildlife from a public roadway is not only dangerous, but is considered unfair chase. If you witness this type of illegal activity, report it to your local agent or call the Operation Game Thief hotline. This has been Missouri Conservation Agent Shannon Smith.
It's the nothing but net buzzer beater.
Made it! Made it at the buzzer! That's good! That counts!
The gravity-defying dunks.
Absolutely flushed it.
It's the rebound that saves the win. The no-look pass around the back. The student body that never stops believing. It's Tiger basketball.
Sponsors include Hoosie's, Memphis Lumber Company, the dental office of Dr. Harlow Donaldson, Breddo Pizza, M's Place, Kirksville Yamaha Honda, and Carpet One.
Try the General Store weekdays with Dave Bowden from 9:06 to 10 a.m. right here. Our two-station simulcast means we get an average of close to 50 calls every weekday. Hundreds of people might be interested in your items, and who knows, you may even find a bargain. Call Dave Bowden on the General Store at 1-800-748-7875 or 660-465-7225.
And yesterday was all we had. And oh, how could the love stop?
We're back. It's 25 till the hour here on Healthy You. Mid-January already. Hope you are washing your hands, coughing into your sleeves, and getting your vaccines. Joining us on Healthy You, Dr. Farron Mannion, Chief of Infectious Diseases and Hospital Epidemiologist at St. John's Mercy Medical Center, talking about the flu and other germs out there waiting to get us. Dr. Mannion, I am still hearing today, I have a resident with me here in the studio, and she'll tell you, she'll testify, once or twice a day, I'm having pregnant patients refusing their vaccines, their influenza vaccines, because the most common answer I get is, it gave me the flu the last time I get it. How do you, as an expert in infectious disease, answer that question when your patient tells you that?
Well, the first issue is, of course, pregnant women. They are more likely to have complications from getting influenza, unfortunately.
I've seen them on ventilators, yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
It is horrible. Yeah. And, of course, you're dealing with two lives, not just one. And so that's really important to, I think, emphasize that pregnancy is definitely a risk factor for getting complications from influenza. So obviously we would want to make sure that the pregnant women are protected as much as possible. Number two is that the vaccine itself, and I get these, to be honest, I deal with the same question, not necessarily from pregnant women, but everybody that, even healthcare workers, my patients. It's probably the number one reason they don't want the flu vaccine, because they get the quote-unquote flu. And the way I actually try to respond to that is that the vaccine itself is denatured. There's no live virus in the vaccine, the injection vaccine, which will be given to pregnant women. And there is no way it can actually cause influenza disease or infection, because the virus cannot, it doesn't have all the material to actually cause any kind of infection. What I think happens is that your immune system senses there's something that it has to make an antibody against, and it's doing what it's supposed to do. And sometimes people don't feel anything after it. Sometimes people get this kind of a 24 hours of flu-ish-like feeling. Unfortunately, sometimes people get the vaccine right in the midst of the influenza epidemic, and then, of course, when they get the influenza, if it happens to be, within a few days of the vaccine, they think that it's probably the vaccine. And so, are we still there?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay,
we're
I'm
good.
sorry.
There was another call there we were trying to get, but they hung up.
Okay, So I tell them that certainly during pregnancy, I would tell them that you do not want to get the flu because the complication rate's higher. And number two, it is definitely better to put up with the symptoms of flu-like symptoms, which are usually pretty mild, even if after you get the vaccine, just for 24, 48 hours, than to actually get the flu itself.
Yeah, and that's my take on it. I think that I can usually explain I call it you're just having a good reaction. Your body's recognizing the vaccine when you feel a little funky, but it's not the flu. It's not going to land you in the ICU. You'll be fine. But I think in reality, the ones that are misinterpreted most vividly are those where they've actually been exposed to the flu either before the vaccine takes effect, or they've been exposed the day before and the vaccine gets blamed for it.
Or it's something totally different from that altogether.
Yeah, or as you said, it's not the flu. It's not influenza. Yeah. Can we have a caller on line 2? Let's take a caller for Dr. Farron Mannion. Go ahead, caller. You're on with Dr. Mannion.
Is that me?
Yeah, that's you. Go.
All right. Is there more flu in warmer type areas versus colder areas? And does the temperature get so cold kill the virus and there's less of it? So it's better that we have longer degrees, times of colder degrees to kill it?
Great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
That's a good question. Certainly in temperate climates, we have seasonality. So throughout the continental U.S., essentially, whether you're in Florida or whether you're, up, in Minnesota, during the winter season, the flu bug gets around really, really effectively. We don't really still understand why there's such a kind of almost like a clockwork effect, where, in temperate climates you start to see it. Now, in true tropical areas, like around the equator and stuff, the flu virus may just be hanging around pretty much year-round. And, it is thought that maybe during the colder seasons, one of the reasons that it might be more effective in terms of being transmitted is that obviously people huddle in the houses, they get into their their living rooms because it's so cold outside, and they're more of a kind of indoor activities, more close quarters, and therefore more likelihood of transmission of the virus because you're probably around a lot of people a lot more than you would be in the summertime. The cold air itself, really doesn't kill the virus because obviously, it seems to do very well during the winter time. We do know that the virus likes people. I mean, it prefers people over, say, the environment. So, I think a lot of studies show that it can stay around the environment like surfaces for about 8 hours, which is still a long time, to be honest. I mean, if you think about it, if you think about an area that people can be touching, especially like, public areas, door handles, things like that, during an 8-hour period that he might be lingering around, there are a lot of hands that are touching that area.
We're all sitting here looking at our microphones going like, 8 hours, 8 hours. I don't know. But again, to emphasize what you said earlier, I want to make sure that that I heard you right. If you get a flu vaccine, it appears to be pretty well matched, and you do get exposed, even though you may get the influenza, it might blunt the disease, even though it may not prevent it?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I can tell you that this is the general thinking. All the experts believe that, although I have to admit that the scientific data to back it up is not so firm in place. I think most of us believe that even if the match is not perfect, having some antibodies that could potentially cross-react with that virus, even in a partial way, may keep you from getting really sick. So we actually make it a selling point, although I have to admit that the data is not so hard to try to back it up. But I think most people believe that that's the case.
Doctor, I was wondering, too, shifting gears just a little bit and addressing a moment whooping cough, and I was wondering about pregnant women. What do we need to tell our listeners? Should pregnant women get vaccinated against whooping cough?
Yeah, this is something that's really been evolving, and I'm glad you're bringing this up because, I think, first of all, I think a lot of people think the whooping cough is something that their great-great-great-grandmother had and was, passed on, that somebody had a terrible time with whooping cough. They think it's just something in the past and not present. But unfortunately, it's actually in the last several years and decade, there's been an increasing number of whooping cough cases in the U.S., and so we do worry about it in pregnancy, at least around the time of pregnancy, only because if you look at who is actually getting really sick from whooping cough, is usually at least half of them are infants less than a year of age, and those are the babies, those newborns, and during the first year, the mortality is much higher during that time period. So we really have to do everything possible to protect the newborn and our infants, because when they get whooping cough, they really can get very sick. They get hospitalized, and occasionally, unfortunately, they can die. So really the question is, what if the mom is not protected? That is, that it's been 30 years since they got the last shot for pertussis or whooping cough, and what if they don't have any antibodies that can be transmitted to the baby, and the baby may not make any antibodies, and they can't even get any shots for the first couple of months of life? And what if they get exposed to whooping cough? They have absolutely no ammunition. There's no way they can actually protect themselves from having complications because they have no antibodies. So more recently, the recommendations have been to make sure that the pregnant women during the second, third trimester actually get vaccinated against pertussis, to make sure that they have antibodies that can go through the placenta into the baby, and the baby will have it for a couple of months until the baby gets vaccinated. So it's very, very important to make sure that the mom gets protected so that she, in turn, can actually have that protection passed to the baby.
It's becoming apparent, I'm reading, that the booster that most people get, I guess the booster, 11, 12 years old, doesn't have the lifelong, as you said, and so should all adults be getting a booster at some point?
Yeah, I mean, in my practice, certainly, as you know, the pertussis or the whooping cough vaccine doesn't come by itself.
Yeah.
That is, it's always kind of associated with tetanus, and everybody gets a tetanus shot. Like, we like to make sure everybody gets a tetanus shot every 10 years. And so certainly an adult that hasn't had, any kind of a pertussis vaccination during their adult life, and certainly if they're due for getting a tetanus shot, make sure that they get the tetanus pertussis variety of vaccines, not just the tetanus, diphtheria by itself, because that's a good chance. That gives us an opportunity to actually give people protection against pertussis. Mm-hmm. It is very important to make sure that we vaccinate not just the babies, obviously, or pregnant women, but also people who are going to be around young infants. And so, that, in our culture now, as you know, a lot of grandmas are taking care of babies. Their babies, a lot of babysitters are obviously taking care of babies, and grandpas, and so a lot of these adults really are not protected anymore because it's been so long since they've had the vaccine. Yeah. So what we were really pushing, I mean, I have my 65-year-olds in the hospital that come in with an infected toe, and I ask them about, have you had a pertussis vaccine? And they usually means no. And actually, if they're taking care of their
yes, I had whooping cough.
Well, hang on, caller. Wait a minute. Let Dr. Mannion finish. Okay, hang on.
Okay.
And we really make a point, especially if they're going to be taking care of, young infants, we say you're going to have to get the pertussis vaccine because that young infant may be exposed to the pertussis through the adults who are not protected.
So that goes for the influenza vaccine too. Anyone who's caring for young children ought to have under 6 months who can't get vaccinated. Make sure that grandmas, grandpas, caregivers are vaccinated. Okay, absolutely. Go ahead, caller. Do you have whooping?
I had whooping cough when I was about 10 years old. Do I need a vaccine now?
Good question. Thanks very much.
I'm a senior citizen now.
Yeah. So the protection from having the whooping cough itself doesn't carry lifelong immunity. So yes, you could still get pertussis again, especially if you're over 65 and it's been many years since you've been exposed or had the disease. So I would say, are you due to get your tetanus vaccine? Has it been over 10 years, or close to 5 or 10 years since you've had your tetanus vaccine?
She's off the line. Let's assume she is due.
And if she is due, then I would just ask the doctor, and say, can you give me the tetanus with the pertussis?
Good.
Call her back.
And I know, Dr. Mannion, we asked for a half an hour, but if I've got 2 quick questions here, and then we're going to have to move along. First of all, mercury in the vaccine. Oh my gosh, I'm going to turn into a mental invalid if I get a vaccine from that mercury. Please bust that myth for me, will you?
Well, it is. There's absolutely, earlier in my in our talk, we talked about there's no scientific data to support, some of the things that we say sometimes. There's absolutely no scientific data to support that. That it is harmful, and I am really concerned about the flu itself. Causing a major illness in pregnant women, and there's scientific data on that.
Yeah, and then finally, for those folks who maybe did get the vaccine, but they're feeling terrible, maybe they're ones that it didn't work in, or they didn't get the vaccine, didn't have a chance, and they get the, give us the little quick vignette. When should you call your doctor so that you can get that treatment early to at least blunt the disease if you do get it?
This is for the influenza?
Yes, influenza.
Yeah. So if you have underlying conditions, for example, if you have heart failure, diabetic, or if you have kidney problems, or problem with your immune system, you're probably going to be more likely to have complications from influenza. And we definitely give you medications for it. Within the first 2 days, it works a lot better. And so if you get sick with a real high fever and you just feel absolutely horrible, you may want to call your doctor anyway, because if you're getting short of breath, if you're feeling just terrible, you feel you're going to pass out, you really need to call your doctor because you may need to be treated. On the other hand, if you have high fever, you don't feel horrible, but you have some of these other underlying diseases, and if it's within the first couple of days, I think it would be reasonable to call your doctor and get the medicine.
I agree. And there is a controversy about close household contacts of people that have definite influenza. I guess if they're in high-risk groups, some docs are going to give Tamiflu. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think if there are people, if it really looks like it's going through the whole family, and there's somebody in the family that just cannot afford to get influenza, I think it's reasonable.
Right. Farron Mannion, you are an awesome doctor and a great radio guest. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks, Doctor.
I hope that
Thank
people
you all very much for the opportunity.
And just send us an invoice for the copay today, okay?
No problem. Just make sure everybody gets their shot.
All right, and tell all of my friends down there at St. John's a big hi from me, would you?
I sure will.
Okay, thanks a lot. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right, hey, we've got a little time left here. We'll open the phone lines, 465-7225.
And 1-800-748-7875.
And when we come back, we may want to talk about the new New York gun law, which is focusing on mental illness as well. For a not-so-controversial topic here to wrap it up on Healthy You. You can count on us. There's Bud. There's Elisa rolling her eyes. I'm Dr. Randy Tobler. We'll be back.
He smiles and says, though this loneliness is driving him crazy, he don't know what goes on in his head. But if you watch very close, you'll see it all.
Did you know Memphis Area Pregnancy Care Center offers a variety of services to our community? We have volunteer counselors who care about you and will lend non-judgmental, compassionate support to help you. We provide free pregnancy testing, parenting education, abstinence information, and support and healing from post-abortion trauma. We can help you with baby supplies and clothing, and we have adoption information and help for those who are grieving from miscarriage or loss of a baby. Call us at 465-7179, and we will make an appointment that's convenient for you.
Planning and patience are the keys to safe winter driving. Plan extra time into your schedule to clean the snow and ice completely from your vehicle and to drive to your destination at a slow, safe speed. Extra time will allow you to be more patient with the weather and other drivers. Take an extra minute before you travel this winter to check the road conditions by calling Missouri's Road Condition Report at 1-800-222-6400. A message from Sergeant Brent Bernhardt of the Missouri State Highway Patrol and KMEM.
From Missouri to Wisconsin, Nebraska to Ohio, Brownfield delivers the top news in agriculture to our nation's Midwest and has done so for over 35 years. Brownfield's committed to local, on-the-ground coverage of the ag news and events important to you. That's why you'll find Brownfield's award-winning reporters in each of our 7 states. Tune to your local Brownfield radio station throughout the day for markets, commentary, analysis, and the latest ag news. You can also find Brownfield on your mobile device or online at brownfieldagnews.com. Brownfield, Ag News for America.
At Brownfield, we give you more than just the numbers. We feature commodity and livestock programs that offer complete analysis. Brownfield's Morning Livestock Report provides a quick overview of cash cattle and hog prices, including the reasons behind the price moves. Every morning, Monday through Friday, our expert reporters make sure you know what to expect from the markets and go beyond the dollars and cents. Brownfield's Morning Livestock Report, more than just numbers. Brownfield, Ag News for America.
Once in a while, and it seems increasingly, you read in the medical health wires about the nexus, the connection between politics and policy and health issues.
Right.
And out of New York, Dateline Albany, we read that the New York has a new gun deal that redefines automatic weapons and semi-automatic weapons and so forth. And there's a lot of gun stuff in there as well.
Yeah.
But a lot of mental health providers are getting very, very concerned because the most significant new proposal, according to the New York Times, would require mental health professionals to report to local mental health officials when they believe that patients are likely to harm themselves or others. Now, just FYI, I mean, this happens all the time in primary care doctors' offices, in psychiatrists, counselors, psychologists, social workers across the land. Every day, a person who says, wow, it's not worth going on. I don't know. Well, have you gone out and done anything about? No, but, I don't know. If I got the cancer and died, it wouldn't be the end of the world. You hear those kind of things.
Sure.
Well, can you imagine the onus that we are now putting if this kind of a law becomes part of national law, or if you're a provider in New York, to, it's going to really put people in the breach. It's going to be very, very difficult. And if you're a patient knowing about this who has a real issue, you're really depressed and you are worried about hurting yourself or someone else.
Right.
And under this law enforcement would then be authorized to confiscate any firearm owned by dangerous patient. Therapists would not be sanctioned for a failure, however, to report such patients if they acted in good faith. Extremely murky business, and I'm not making a judgment here other than to say my concern is shared by other docs. Dr. Paul Applebaum, the director of the Division of Law, Ethics, and Psychiatry at Columbia University College of Physicians and Surgeons, said that this represents a major change in the presumption of confidentiality that has been inherent and actually is what allows many people to come to doctors with their problems, because you know that it's going to be held in confidence.
Sure, so they're not going to say anything. The thing that irritates me most about deals like this is how much time and money are they going to spend on this one issue when mental health suffers so much from so many different areas that need to be addressed that nobody
That's right. Allowing people to be treated earlier in their illness rather than it gets to a crisis might be an idea. Duh. The prospect of being reported to local authorities, says Dr. Applebaum, even if they do not have weapons, may be enough to discourage patients with suicidal or homicidal thoughts from seeking treatment, obviously, or from being honest about their impulses. You may be setting up the perfect storm here where people will not divulge.
They're not gonna say anything.
And there are very, very tricky laws and regs in every jurisdiction. As far as I know, in Missouri, we do not have to report that. So if you are feeling down and if you are feeling worse than that, and if it's leading you to have thoughts that aren't healthy about yourself or others, let your doctor know, because currently we don't live in New York and we don't have to report it.
We don't have to report that.
Now there are certain instances if you make a threat, obviously, or there's direct stuff.
Sure.
There's different, but I think these are sort of like, the old Supreme Court said, obscenity when you see it. A mental health professional knows someone is going to be violent when they see it.
Exactly.
Right? Okay. All right. Well, we'll be keeping an eye on those guys.
Next week.
Someone's got to do it. What's next week?
Next week, Dr. Kraus, our favorite cardiologist from Quincy.
Very,
cardiology
very good.
Next week.
So we'll
Dr.
talk
Kraus.
a little cardiology next week on Healthy You. And remember, until then, all together now, get your flu vaccine, wash your hands, don't touch your eyes, nose, mouth, and when you're putting on your makeup, be careful, okay, Bud?
Okay,
all right.
I'll try not to slip.
For Bud, for Elisa, I'm Dr. Randy Tobler. Thanks for being here. Remember, this week, be well. Share it with someone you love, but don't hug them too tight if you're sick, okay? We'll see you next time.
But you don't know it's true, 'cause you can see it when I look at you. And in
You're listening to the best in area news, weather, and sports on America's Best Country, 100.5 KMEM Memphis, Missouri.